Welcome back to Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name's David. Now, if you're new to the channel or you want to keep up with all the videos that I post out, please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. Now, in this video, we're going to discuss critical race theory. And the reason we're doing this is because PragerU put out a video. They do a lot of videos about critical race theory. This is just, their most recent one. But before that, I want to just discuss what critical race theory is and who PragerU is. PragerU is this anti-intellectual group of conservatives who are pushing these ideas that they don't make any sense. Most notably is a pro-slavery video to Own the Libs about how taking down Robert E. Lee's statue is bad because he was kind of related to George Washington. His house is where Arlington Cemetery is, and he put down the John Brown insurrection. I'm going to show you one clip of that, and I'm going to tag the video into the bottom of my video just to show you, so you can see what I'm saying, it being pro slavery. So let's go to that, and then we're going to go into what critical race theory, the 5 tenements of it is, and then we're going to watch the actual video, the PragerU video. So this radical abolitionist John Brown, this is them talking about proudly. They're happy that one of the reasons that Robert E. Lee is an American hero is because he put down the John Brown revolution. So that's one of the things that you need to understand is coming from this. Now, what is critical race theory? Now, let's be clear. Critical race theory is being used by the right as this boogeyman idea that it's that the schools are making your kids hate America. That this is idea that is fundamentally anti-American because it just says everybody and everything is racist and it will never change and never stop. And you're all racist and we should all bow down to black people. And that's what they push this idea as. That's not what it is. So critical race theory, these are the 5 tenets. Recognition that race is not biologically real but a social construct and socially significant. Now, here's why it says that. It recognizes that science, and it's demonstrated the Human Genome Project, refutes the idea of biological racial differences. Among scholars Richard Denglo and Jennifer, I'm not even going to pronounce that, race is a product of social thought is not connected to biological reality. Now, what this means is it's saying that there really isn't a lot of biological differences between races. Not enough that there should be, that they're inherently smarter or that they're inherently harder working or things like that. That those don't exist. Acknowledge that racism is a normal feature of society and is embedded within systems and institutions, like the legal system, that replicate racial inequality. This dismisses the idea that racist incidents are aberrations, but instead are manifestations of structure and systemic racism. Look, it is objectively true that the legal system and the prior systems in America have had racial components in them. They've had their history rooted in racism. The police started as not a peacekeeping force, but a slave-catching force. The legal system is there's overwhelming evidence that it is not only not fair to not only is it unfair to African Americans, but it's also unfair to poorer people. So it's even further than that. We have information on banking and credit cards. And look, the people argue, oh, well, these aren't laws anymore, or there's laws against it. These still are things that are set into our system that need to be changed. Rejection of a popular understanding that racism, such as an argument that confines racism to a few bad apples. This is the police example. Critical race theory recognizes racism codified in law, embedded in structures, and woven into public policy. Critical race theory rejects claims of mediocrity or colorblindness, recognizes that there is a systemic nature of racism that bears primary responsibility for reproducing racial inequality. Look, the few bad apples argument doesn't work because there's a system in place to make sure that they can keep going. Most recently, there was Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin is potentially in line to be charged again for assaulting a different African-American kid years ago, and he was kneeling on that one for 17 minutes after assaulting him. We see cops all the time that have shifted from departments after different things happen where they need to hide or something. The other thing is this idea that people are colorblind. You can't be colorblind. If your argument is, oh, I don't see color, then you're not looking at what's actually going on, because there is a difference in color, and there's a difference in how people are treated because of that color. Recognition of the relevance of people's everyday lives to scholarships. This includes embracing the lived experience of people in color, including those preserved through storytelling, and rejected deficit-informed research that includes the. I don't even understand this last part. So anyway. Look, critical race theory, the whole idea of it is, and this, keep in mind, this is a scholarly idea. This isn't something that's generally taught in schools. They say it's being taught in schools, but when something like this is being taught, it's pushing against the whitewashing of history, because American history is generally very whitewashed. And a perfect example of that is when you see Martin Luther King pictures in textbooks and stuff, they're all black and white. Because the implication for that is that it's something that's happened further in the past. But there are colored pictures of him, not like not black and white pictures of Martin Luther King, and that brings it more to a substantial thing. This is not that long ago. Martin Luther King was only like a generation ago. So it's not that you might have parents or grandparents who were alive when that happened. So this is not so far-fetched. So look. Part of what critical race theory is it looks at how the American system is set up, and it looks at it based on how it affects by race. So it's not this idea that America is irredeemable. It's not this idea that America is not perfect. It's this idea that there are systemic issues that we need to solve, and it's objectively true that these are things that need to happen. So let's watch this video from PragerU. Now, one of the other things PragerU doesn't do is they don't really cite their sources, and they make a lot of just general statements. But they do it because they put it with good music, or they put it with a whole bunch of scary words. So let's watch this video.
Have you heard about critical race theory? I'm guessing you probably have. It has already insinuated itself into many institutions and is making rapid progress into others. If it takes hold, it will completely change the very nature of America and the way you live.
Okay. Nothing I said, I showed it to you, says that. This is what they do. They do this. There's one all the way up to the president. Donald Trump tried to ban critical race theory and institute basically his the 1776 project, which is something else that they're arguing about. It was like nationalism. The critical race theory does not change how America runs. It is a scholarly idea that they're looking at the impacts of racism in the way our society runs.
Critical race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race.
That is just blatantly not true. We saw this. The tenets of, I just read you the tenets. That is not a single tenet of this. So right off the bat, they're going to lie to you.
The color of your skin, that's who you are. Not your behavior, not your values, not your environment. Your race. In critical race theory, if you are a member of a minoritized racial group, their term, not mine, you are a victim of a system that is rigged against you. A system...
Look, it is true. Look, there's two ways to look at this. It is true that the system has kept minorities down. But in the same way that it has done that, you shouldn't, extol yourself for being born into certain privileges. If you're born into a wealthy family, you shouldn't feel bad about that. You can't control that. It's like being born in America versus being born in a third world country. So you may be the dumbest person alive and born in America and have infinitely more opportunities than the next genius who's born in a third world country and can't access the level of opportunities. Certain things that you have no control over, you shouldn't push for because you're happy about them, but you also shouldn't beat yourself up for it. There's nothing wrong with being born into wealth. There's nothing wrong with being born white or black, whatever it is. Those are things you can't control, so it doesn't matter what happens to them. You have what you have because of birth, which are things you can't control.
That doesn't want you to succeed. On the other hand, if your race is privileged, you're an exploiter, whether you intend to be or not. Critical race theory begins from the assumption that racism occurs in all interactions. To see how this works, Consider this thought experiment.
Now, keep in mind, this is a thought experiment, and this is not really a good one, but this idea that racism becomes moral interactions. Look, there are biased racist. We all have unconscious biases, and they happen. Part of what critical race theory is looking at those biases and understanding where they come from.
Imagine you own a shop and two customers enter at the same time, one white and one black. Who do you help first? If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say you did so because you don't trust black people to be left alone in your store. That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you think blacks are second-class citizens.
Neither of these things were shown in what I showed you. Now, the correct answer for this is you help whoever came in first, or whoever. If you don't want to pick who you help first, you just wait and make sure, see if they need help. Because a lot of times people go into a store and they don't need help. And if you're in a tiny store like this, if they need help, they'll ask you. Or you help the first person. This is not a race thing.
That's racist too. That's critical race theory. It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it.
Yes, critical race theory can find racism in everything, because the point of critical race theory, is to look into what historically has had racial influences on things that have happened. So yeah, if you're looking for racism in the context of things, you're going to find that where it exists.
Critical race theory is a uniquely American invention. Brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s, now part of the academic and media mainstream,
it's not part of any of those. Look, it's generally a theory. We have lots of theories. We have modern monetary theory. We have Marxism is a theory. Socialism are theories. This is not mainstream in any way, shape, or form. It's counter-mainstream from the right because they argue that it is the left preaching this when that is not true.
Uniquely un-American because it rejects the core tenets of the American classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system.
Now, this is actually technically true because a lot of one of the tenets of critical race theory says that it rejects liberalism, and part of the reason it does that is because liberalism has not gone far enough to deal with the problems, and we have living proof of that every day. Look, this liberalism that the Democratic Party has been pushing for the last 20 years has failed. The Republican conservatism over the past since Reagan has failed even harder. We understand that these ideas of the past are not working. So yes, these core tenets need to change. This liberal Judeo-Christian value. The problem with this is, while you say it's Judeo-Christian, you're already putting bias into it because we are not a Christian company. Yes, the people of power have a lot of Christian ties, and that was a really big issue. But that's a misunderstanding of how America should be. And this is my opinion, obviously. I don't care what religion you are. I'm not going to force my religion on you. If you try to force your religion on me, you don't understand how America works.
It turns the bedrock American idea upside down. Here it is in the words of Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchik.
Those are the two that basically started it.
Leading proponents. Critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law.
All right, so let's take this little liberal order. I already talked about that. Equality theory, let's see what the equality theory is. Equality theory focuses on determining whether distribution of resources is fair to both rational parties. So this is saying that everybody has to be the same, and that's not what they're pushing. What they're pushing for is everyone has the same opportunities. Legal reasoning and neutral principles of the constitutional law. We already talked about this. We know that the system is biased against minorities. There's plenty of evidence to prove that.
It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always, and they look.
Racism it's not everywhere and always, but it is present in the system.
For it critically until they find it.
a lot of this video appears to be taking the words and highlighting them to be scary. Yes, it's a critical look at the systems that we have. That's not a scary thing. A lot of what this is fear-mongering over the idea that the America isn't the idea that you were sold on.
And they always find it. It has to be there because that's how the imperial European powers and then America set things up.
I mean, this is an objectively true statement. It is an objectively true statement that things were set up with a racist thought process. From slavery to Jim Crow to redlining to the way certain laws to the war on drugs, there is objective truth to that statement.
Here, as in all dangerous academic theories, there is a kernel of truth. Human beings were not preoccupied with race until the 16th century, when Europeans began to explore and then colonize other parts of the world.
That can't be like a real thing. There was absolutely, yes, to be fair, it was harder to be more overtly racist because, transportation was harder, so it was harder to move around the globe. But I'm sure interactions with different races had their own races. Europeans were racist to the Irish and the Spanish and the French.
Drawing distinctions between the races reached its peak in the 19th century with the widespread use of slave labor in North and South America. No one denies this. But since then, the Western world, and most especially America, has spent a lot of time, money, and blood.
This is one of actually the arguments that make that people who are afraid of this type of thought push. Well, we can't be racist. We had the Civil War. But to understand what that means is we fought against our own selves in order to stop slavery from continuing. And for those people say it was states' right to do what? Own people. So as soon as this is their always argument, and it doesn't hold up, the Civil War was the second largest mass casualty event in the history of America, varying on what, if you take it from the projected low end to the projected high end, it varies around that versus coronavirus. But it was objectively a racist statement, war, because it was designed to keep people enslaved.
Breaking free of its racist past. It's been a rocky road for sure, but great progress has been made. Critical race theory says all this progress is a mirage. Racism never died, never even faded a little bit. It just hid itself better.
So this idea that it didn't fade, it did fade. It's still there. It did hide itself better. There's objective facts that prove that it did.
Critical race theory, therefore, is not a continuation of the civil rights movement. It is, in fact,
I don't think it projects itself as that.
Repudiation of it. To critical race theorists, Martin Luther King was both wrong and naive.
I don't think that's true at all. Nothing I saw says that is true. I mean, yes, he was. No. Anyway.
White Americans can never judge blacks by the content of their character. They can only judge them, always unfavorably, consciously or unconsciously, by the color of their skin.
No. Neither of those statements are true. Yes, everyone has unconscious biases. Part of that is because you're grown up with them. Part of that is how you're portrayed. Things are portrayed in the media. Part of that is the people who influence you and the way you were taught in schools, that there are biases there. But critical race theory does not say you are not allowed to what is the words they actually used? White Americans can never judge
blacks by the content of their character. They can only judge them, always
this is just not a true statement,
consciously or unconsciously, by the color of their skin. Ironically, not since the Aryan obsession in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s, or South African apartheid in the second half of the 20th century, has the social movement been so obsessed with race. Critical race
theory is not a social movement. I know they like to tag it to BLM or Democrats or whatever, but I can't imagine why a system of academic studies looking into how racism has impacted our country would be focused on race.
theory is then, in a very real sense, a counter-American revolution. But that's a positive, not a negative to those who subscribe to the theory. The American experiment was given a 400-year tryout, and it doesn't work. So let's scrap it. That's what they believe.
That's not at all what they believe. There's no proof of that being a thing. They push this idea of it, but it's not.
Is that what you believe? I'm going to guess that most of you don't. So how do we stop critical race theory before it infects the brains of too many decent Americans, especially young people, and turns us into something we have never been and shouldn't ever want to be?
Which is what? Look, a lot of this is just big, scary buzzwords. There's no, real backing to any of these things. They only used one quote from the people. They didn't go into any of the tenets or what it's actually put. They used one quote, and the rest is scary buzzwords with nothing to back it up. This is the problem with PragerU. They use a lot of these type of videos, and they say a whole bunch of scary things, but they never back up anything that they say.
Simple. Refuse to accept it. Don't be intimidated by the heads I win, tails you lose logic of this self-destructive, America-hating, anti-reality idea.
Well, this is what it's just all buzzwords. It's all nonsense. I'm doing another video about this, about how conservatives literally, it's all just buzzwords and nonsense at this point. Nothing in critical race theory is self-destructive or anti-reality. It's not American hating. It's taking an objective look at what has actually happened in this country. We do have racist roots, and we do have currently racist policies. They are not objectively, they are not, you have to go drink in a separate water fountain. But that's what they are.
Don't be bullied into thinking that you're racist when you know you're not.
See, this is the other thing. They say, you're racist when you're not. So they do this every so often where they find a school and they're like, this is doing critical race theory because they said you might be uncomfortable during this seminar, or what if someone called you a racist? And they'll misconstrue what's being played there. Also, their argument is being called a racist is worse than being actually racist. So look, critical race theory is not bullying you into whether you're a racist or not. That's just not what it is.
Or that you're a victim when you know you're not.
Yes, obviously they're not. No one is saying, look, there are people who are saying objectively that all of their faults are because of you're black, so you're obviously a victim of this. Look, objectively speaking, they are at a disadvantage. There are statistics to prove that. But you do have some free will, but you can't just ignore the fact that the deck is stacked in a certain way.
Defend yourself while you still can. I'm James Lindsay.
Defend yourself while you still... Look, all right, we're done here. Look, the problem with this video and PragerU in itself is there's nothing there. It's a big scare mob. They want you to be afraid of a thing that's not super scary, because to them, it's scary. It's, I don't want to be called racist, so you telling me that there's racist things in my past or that I might have subconscious racist biases makes me sad. And I don't want to hear that. Therefore, you're bad. That's what they're pushing in this. Everything he said there was nonsense. Please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter, and I will see you in the next one.